Hi everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Today I am underneath this Triumph Spitfire because we're trying to track down a vibration. There's a few things that it could be. I'm pretty confident that I've identified it, but let me take you through some of the possibilities if you are having a vibration. So first thing you want to do, take it for a drive, make sure you're listening to what type of sound is it. Is it a rubbing sound? Is it a clicking? Is it a rotating noise? And then pay attention to when it happens. So, for example, does it happen based on speed or RPM? So if you're in second gear and you shift to third, does the noise change? As opposed to if you go from 20 miles an hour to 40 to 60, does it change or go away then? So if it's speed dependent but doesn't change when it's RPM, that's going to help rule some things out. But anyway, let's take a look and I'll kind of walk through some of the things that could be a vibration and what to look for. One of the first things, of course, to suspect is going to be the wheels. You can have a tire noise or a brake noise. And one way to identify which side of the car it's on, turn the steering wheel left to right, kind of do a slalom maneuver. And if you notice the noise changing when you're turning hard left or hard right, that's going to help point you to which side of the car it's on. So if you're turning to the right, the car leans left, right, because that's the outside of the corner. So if you're pulling hard to the right, the car is leaning left. If the noise gets worse, you know that it's on the left side of the car. And then if you turn back to the left and the noise goes away, you've taken a lot of the weight off of the left side of the car. It's on the right side at that moment, and so if the noise is quieter, again, you know it's on the left side of the car. So you can tell where the noise is. With the tires, try just rotating them. If you've got wire wheels like I do, you want to make sure that these adapters are tight, at least on Triumphs. With a lot of cars, this is going to be part of the axle, but on, I think, all of the Triumphs, but I could be wrong on that. You want to check that the lug nuts that actually hold the adapter on are tight. Because behind the wire wheels, it's actually the same. There's still 4 lug nuts, the same as you would use to hold on an ordinary road wheel. But instead of the wheel, they've placed these adapters on, and then you've got your center spoke wheel goes on and the spinner on top of that. And so this could be loose underneath. So jack up all 4 corners. This is just a maintenance thing you should be doing anyway. But jack up each corner, shake the wheel side to side. If it goes side to side, that usually indicates a steering problem. Also shake it top to bottom. That will usually indicate a bearing. Either one could indicate this is loose. If you are stopping and going and you hear a clunk, a lot of times it's just a loose wheel. So you want to make sure, again, that the wire wheels are tight, make sure that the adapters are tight, and even if you don't have wire wheels, just check the lug torque. Go around it with a torque wrench. Again, routine maintenance, you should be doing this sort of stuff periodically anyway, but could be the wheels. A lot of forums are going to point to the brake rotors, which you can see through the wire wheel here. And what happens with the rotors is that they can get warped. Technically, what you need to do to test it is to take the wheel off, spin the rotor against a dial indicator, and see if it's actually warped or not. You can also just junk them and put on new rotors. My advice, don't really worry about this unless it's time to do brakes, and then if it is, don't bother machining these. The rotors on these cars are so cheap that you should really just replace them anyway. Sticking with tires for just a moment, you want to move your hands over the surface, and what you're looking for is, does it feel rough in one direction, smooth in another? Look at the tread. You want to make sure that it's not wearing unevenly. Alignment problems can cause uneven tire wear, which then can cause vibrations. So that's something else to be aware of. Most of the vibration noises that you're going to find are going to in fact be tire or brake noises, but on the Spitfires in particular, there's more to check. These U-joints, if you're hearing a clicking noise, I can guarantee you it's going to be the U-joints, or nearly guarantee you anyway. And what happens is that the clearance between the U-joints and the width of the yoke that they're sitting in, there's a small amount of clearance, and the new U-joints just don't fit properly. And so what happens is they will go in, you'll get the clips in, but the joints inside will be shifting ever so slightly. A couple thousandths is all you really need, but the joints inside are going to be moving ever so slightly, and because of the way the Spitfire is designed, where the axle is carrying a lot of load, it matters even more, and the more camber you have, the more it's going to matter, or whether it's negative or positive. If the axle's not straight out, it's going to make a difference. U-joints on these, if you're hearing a clicking noise while you're driving along, this is probably where it is. Change them on both sides. Unfortunately, to get at this U-joint, you do have to disconnect the spring because otherwise it's going to everything's basically going to collapse when you go to take it apart. So you have to disconnect the spring from each side, and then you can get the U-joint out and you can install a new one. Again, fairly easy to get the components. You can get good ones, use a decent brand, but that would be another noise to look for. Let's see, the differential itself can make noise. Typically that's going to be a whining. You can see mine's leaking, so if I don't pay attention to that, I'll probably end up with a whining noise. I've installed a drain plug on mine, by the way. If you ever have yours out of the car, you can drill a hole through the bottom of the back of the case, and you can put a plug in it, like I've done. So really cool idea. It's a good maintenance idea, because then you can drain the fluid in it and put in new stuff. But anyway, we're not here to talk about that. It could be the diff. The diff is also going to be road speed dependent. So if you're shifting gears and there's a howling and it changes, probably not the diff. And moving forward, then you've got the transmission. Now, if it's road speed dependent and not RPM dependent, it's the back half of the transmission. If you've got an overdrive, your problem could be in there. If you don't have an overdrive, it could be anything along the main shaft. I've got some videos on rebuilding a Spitfire gearbox. If you've got a TR6 or any of the other Triumphs, even an MG, they're largely the same. Just how you take the pieces apart is a little bit different, but how the gearboxes work, they're largely the same thing for any manual transmission. So let's see, if it's road speed dependent, it's the back half of that. If it's not road speed dependent, if it's changing with RPM, now you're looking at the engine. It could be the clutch, could be the front half of the transmission. As you shift gears, the noise is changing. So that's what you're looking at. Could be potentially bad engine mounts, although engine mounts from these cars weren't that spectacular to begin with. It's just solid blocks of rubber, and so if you're experiencing a vibration, well, yeah, it's solidly mounted to the car. You're probably going to get some of that, but a bad vibration is likely to be something mechanical that's spinning. So that's what you're experiencing there. Now, what I have found it to be in this car, the symptoms are that it is a noise that was road speed dependent, so I knew back of the transmission all the way through the wheels. I knew that it didn't change when I rotated the tires. I knew that I had just changed the U-joints because I had the clicking not too long ago, so it wasn't that. And actually I recently had the diff out of the car while it was making this noise, just for maintenance. You saw that I put in that plug, and so there's really not too much left that it could be. But what was happening was that there's a vibration that got very loud, starting at about 35 miles an hour or so, and then it got really bad by the time you got to highway speed. You could hear it with the top down very easily. You could feel it while you were driving. There's only a couple of things that could be, and what I found is my prop shaft. So a couple of things that can wear at this. First of all, you've got U-joints at either end. These can go bad. So just because you've replaced the U-joints on the axles doesn't mean that you've got all of them. There's one that goes up by the gearbox and one that goes by the diff. These can go bad. It can cause a vibration. And keep in mind, the diff, remember, is in this car, it's 4.1 or somewhere around there to 1. This thing's going to be spinning 4 times faster than the wheels, and so it's going to magnify any sound that you're getting. So the U-joints can be bad, and a little bit of a vibration will become a big problem pretty quickly. You will also see there's typically a couple of weights. This is how you know it's balanced. If you see a spot where one of these it just seems to have fallen off, maybe it rusted away and just kind of flew off, that could be a problem. I thought this was in good shape because I did see these, so it took me forever to track it down. But on the older Spitfires, there is a spline in here that allows it to move in and out, right? And maybe you can hear that. This one is pretty loose. And so there's some internal components here that as they wear, it can throw this thing out of balance, which is going to cause a shake, and it's going to get bad with road speed. So this thing, I believe, is toast. I could probably have it rebuilt. We'll see what I'm going to do with it. But I've bought a brand new one because I like spending money, and it's pretty. So if I'm ever sitting underneath the car with a lawn chair to admire it, I can now look at this fabulous piece of equipment. So make sure you get the right one. It's different for an overdrive car than it is for a standard transmission, and I'm going to be installing it now. I apologize if it's a little dark down here. If you have a lift, it makes this a lot easier. If you don't, you can still do it on the ground, not a big deal. This bar is just my flashlight. There are usually some grease fittings on the end. My transmission gearbox tunnel is off, so I'm going to grease this after I put it in the car while I'm tightening everything up at the front. Anyway, if you don't have easy access, you can do this entirely from underneath the car. So if you don't have easy access, my advice, grease it now. Make sure that you've got some in there. But basically, you take the old one out, which I've already done. Just kind of feed the new one in. Some cars, it may be easier if you take down the exhaust first before you do this. And then be aware that two of these holes are going to be closer together than the other set. So you want to match it up to however it is on the car. You will have taken out 4 bolts and throw this lock nut away. It's got a little plastic insert on it, and when you tighten it on the nut, that plastic insert holds it tight. But once it's on the first time, these things are junk. I always put the bolts through front to back. If you've got nothing but time, buy exactly the number of nuts and whatnot that you need. If you can't afford to keep going back to the hardware store in frustration and agony, my advice is to buy a couple extra nuts, because you are going to drop them and it's going to roll somewhere in your perfectly clean garage that for some reason you still will never be able to find till years later, long after you've sold the car. Trust me, it's happened. Now, to get more room, what you want to do, so I've got this on a lift. This is going to be much more difficult if you don't. Actually, if you don't, just rotate the wheels. If you do have it on a lift, kind of like I do, then you want to have it in neutral, and of course have it chocked. And simply roll the car till the next nut's in view, and then put your wheel chocks back so it can't keep rolling. Right at this point, you're watching me tighten bolts. So you'll have to let me know in the comments below whether this is helpful to not skip any of these steps, or if you guys actually don't care about this stuff. As a complete aside, I do like watching videos of other people that are doing work on their cars, and one of the #1 things I will say, guys, some of you please get a tripod. Holding the phone camera, wobbling it around, I've actually gotten motion sickness watching some of these videos. So for those of you that aren't motion sick right now, you're welcome. There's a lot of good information out there, but yeah, please work on the video skills a little bit. It helps. While you're down here, you want to make sure that all of your bolts holding the differential on are tight, and you're under the car. Take a quick look at the U-joints. Make sure that there's just nothing that's sloppy that needs attention. I mean, obviously this is leaking, but I'm not going to take that apart right now. You should pull the plug and check the level of the fluid. And I'm not going to get into what type of fluid you need to put in your car, because that'll just spark debates, but MT90, seriously, in the Spitfire, that's what I use. That's what any Triumph Spitfire should be using. There are other fluids that are just as good, but that's the one that I've picked, and it is fine in the diff. So that's pretty much it. All right, let's get to the front side. You need to get the bolts to line up on these two. Easy thing to do, just put the transmission in neutral and spin it. Okay, and then as far as rotating this, same thing. You could do this by moving the wheels at the back of the car. If you've already happened to have set that on the ground, not a big deal. Just put the car in neutral and roll it, and it will shift that as well. I'll show you. I'm not going to tighten it right now. I'm going to come back to it, because otherwise I might have trouble getting the other bolts in. So what's just happened is I've just now realized that the gearbox that I have is from a slightly later Spitfire. It's a 3-rail gearbox, but it's probably from a Mark IV Spitfire. It's a little better internals. Anyway, that's not important. But what is important is that this flange at the back of it, I believe, is not the same size as the flange on my drive shaft, which means that even though the drive shaft is brand new, I'm pretty much going to have to take the yoke off and swap it with the one from the other drive shaft. So I'm going to do that now. All right, look at that bonus section of the video as you get to see U-joints. Pretty cool. Okay, and bam, brand new flange. Healey, you're falling asleep on the job, pal.